Hello and welcome to the strange world of New Zealand. Spirits. Today marks the second entry of our venture into the unique island country of New Zealand. Just in case you missed it, part 1 of the series was about cryptids, and this video today marks our halfway point before the end of this mini-series. The original idea was suggested by Richard Blackburn, so a huge thank you goes out to you. So far, you all seem to be enjoying this, and I couldn't be happier. Today we look at some of the spirits of lore, as well as the interesting points of view that many natives of the area see these specters as. When it comes to the native people of New Zealand, known as the Māori, spirits are seen in a different light, somewhat similar to the Native Americans. They can be both kind or devious in nature. Many of such are held in high esteem as a form of guardian over specific locations, as well as some of the people. In another sense, the sight of them can also invoke a message of warning or impending doom. When a person of the Maori culture is about to pass on, great preparations are undertook to ensure that the spirit is able to leave the body and doesn't become restless and unable to move on. The procedure is called tuku wairua and is a form of a blessing that is performed by a priest or by one of the dying person's family members, just so long as it isn't the spouse. After death, a ceremony is held to celebrate the passing of a loved one, and it is believed that if not done, then the spirit may return and cause turmoil in the family, or choose to fatally harm one of them. Being as how spirits are never truly seen as being gone and are said to watch over their family members, it is greatly important to ensure that they are happy. The spirit is known as the wairua, and while it is said to leave the body during death, it is also believed to exit the body while a person is asleep and dreaming. The spirit then wanders about looking for any dangers that may cause harm to the body. Due to this, dreams play an important role in the Maori culture, similar to that of the Australian Aboriginal dream states. Within this, many of the spirits of New Zealand were never human, but are of great significance as guardians. Kiwa. Our first entry in our visit into the spirit world in New Zealand brings us to the being known as the Kiwa. These are basically the spirit of a human who has passed that has returned to the living realm. This can even occur after a person has died, and they normally can roam about until the body is finally buried. These beings are said to be invisible to most people. However, the spirits of people dreaming can see them, as well as priests who are in a deep trance. They can be both friendly and malicious in nature and have been linked with inflicting disease upon the living. Similar to the common lore involved with ghosts around the world, these spirits normally only show up at night time, as they can't stand the sunlight or even bonfires. Frequently, these spirits choose to communicate with the living via light disembodied whispers, which almost sounds like a whistle. These beings are capable of taking over a human vessel and speaking through them as well. According to lore, these ghosts will return to their final resting spot of their bones at a grave site. Any living person who trespasses on their final resting spot can anger the spirit, which in turn will cause disease or even death to those who are intruding. Within this, it is said that any time a person is walking at night and they feel a hot breath on them, then it means that a Kiwa is in the area. What makes these spirits different the most is the fact that they are known to get hungry, and some believe that they feed on flies and garbage. Phantom canoe. Moving on with our list, we find a very interesting case of spirits being seen and alerting the living to an impending natural disaster. In the northern island of New Zealand lies two popular locations, Mount Tarawera, known as the Burnt Spear, and the largest water source named Lake Tarawera. The lake is over 7 miles long, or 11 kilometers, 5.5 miles wide, or 9 kilometers, and has a depth of 287 feet, or 87 meters. The mountain is currently a dormant volcano, and reportedly got its nickname Burnt Spear from a hunter who left his spears and hut near the landmark, and when he returned the following season, they were found to be burnt, and the hut had been burnt down. This area was a location known to draw many tourists in to visit, due to its natural beauty. This, as well as the Maori village of Tūrehu, with its famous natural pink and white terraces. While many may assume by the name that these terraces were part of a building, They actually were geothermal springs comprising the world's largest deposit of silica sinter. Outside of all this, on May 31st and June 10th, 1886, the area was able to add 2 new entries into the history books. The first event was in May. A tourist boat was making its way onto the lake when suddenly visitors noticed a strange craft out in the water that seemed out of place. According to eyewitness reports, they saw a large boat filled with Maori people. The craft housed 2 rows of individuals rowing, and a few were seen standing. Descriptions go into detail as the men on the boat wore flaxed robes and had their hair plumed for death with feathers of the haya and white heron. Others describe being so close that water could be seen glistening off the paddles. All attempts to hail the craft returned unanswered. Since no craft similar to this had ever been on the lake before, it was believed that the boat was ferrying the dead to Tūrehu Mountain. Many sightings of strange objects and creatures have very few facts about them, but the encounter that day was reported by a multitude of people, including a completely different touring boat seeing the same thing. Events would take a darker turn when many of the locals believed this sighting was in fact a warning of some impending disaster. Only a few weeks later, Mount Tūrehu would awake from its slumber and spew fire and ash onto the village below. In its aftermath, over 150 people were killed, the village was buried, and the pink and white terraces were gone and thought to be destroyed. As a side note, they were found to be buried at the bottom of the lake. So it appears the Māori were correct in viewing the phantom canoe as a warning, and in doing so, the ancestors may have saved quite a few lives. Tūrehu. With our final entry, we go into a little bit of a unique territory. I hate to admit that this topic alone single-handedly put a hold on me finishing this video. The reason behind this is due to the fact that I couldn't justify including it, but at the same time I couldn't allow myself to leave it out. The issue is that Tūrehu have been described as a spirit being, which would fit with our topic, but in other versions it is a living flesh and blood group of individuals, which excludes it from what we're talking about. Not only this, but in yet another telling, there is simply a metaphor for something else more mundane. So being as how I can't figure out the best way to present this, I will tell you everything about them, all variations, and I'm apologizing in advance if you decide it shouldn't be in this entry. Starting off and quite characteristic to many of the things talked about so far, the Tūrehu have many different variations of its name, including the frequently referenced Petapuri. Not to stall again, but all the different names for the same being did make it difficult to discern which spirits were the same or something unique. These beings are said to live in dense forests, but are more commonly linked with mountainous areas. In a version, they are an invisible spirit that live like normal people do, but nothing about them can be seen. This even goes as far as saying their villages are found in the spirit realm, as are they. With this, the only thing that says they exist are sometimes Maori people can hear them having conversations or even paddling a canoe out in the water, but never is anything ever physically seen. One of the most common interpretations is that these things are spirits of the forest, but more so in the way of the Fae, where they are unique but at the same time have physical bodies. In this variation that is frequently mentioned, they range in heights, have very pale, almost opaque skin, huge pink eyes, and normally have wild red hair. They frequently can be heard singing or playing a flute made out of bone. The problem is that their songs are intended to almost hypnotize people, allowing the Tūrehu to kidnap them and take them back to their villages. In some versions of this same being, it can be looked at as almost a cryptid, where it even has hooves for feet and has been known to leave prints on beach sand. However, in other variations, they are seen as spirits that haven't moved to the afterlife yet and are intent on taking humans with them. In yet another variation, the Tūrehu were seen almost in a godlike view, where they were considered the lord of the soil and everything on New Zealand belonged to them. This went as far as the Maori fearing them and even leaving tokens of offerings in order to keep their beings happy. Flipping this a whole 180 degrees, some believe that the Tūrehu were actually the misidentified creatures known as European visitors. This ties with many descriptions of the Tūrehu, that they wore fancy unfamiliar clothes including white suits, generally kept to themselves in their villages, had red or brown hair with well-kept beards, and did have a habit for taking females for sexual purposes. In no form of this creature are they generally nice to the Maori, but as you can see, it is quite a confusing situation to try to deduce what exactly is being talked about. So this concludes our spirit portion of New Zealand. Be sure to be on the lookout for our final video in our mini-series where we look at haunted locations. That is, if I don't decide to make one on UFO encounters as well. As many of you are all aware, about a month ago I was approached by a small online company by the name of Into the AM. Not being a big hoodie type of guy, preferring zip-ups, I decided to check them out before agreeing to anything, and I was shocked to find that many of their designs were pertaining to the paranormal, alien, or space content, which is really hard to find. They sent me a hoodie and I have to say I absolutely love it. Also, come to find out, they do make zip-ups also. Along with this, they gave me a discount code to share that will save all of you 10% on any order you make with them. At the checkout, just type Ice Wolf Videos with no spaces and save. As a side note for those of you who are gamers, I recently was told that the company is going to start making God of War clothing as well, so that is pretty cool. Speaking of which, they need to send me one of those too. If you haven't yet done so, please consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this, and if you would be so kind, also share this video with someone whom you might think might be interested in this type of genre. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.